You think folks in Appalachia only ate store-bought cereal and instant grits in the 1970s. Think again. These mountain kitchens served up some of the most ingenious stick-to-your-ribs and surprisingly sophisticated meals in American rural history. From hoa cakes to fried cornmeal mush that could fuel a full day's work, these aren't hillbilly. Let's dig into 25 hillbilly breakfast recipes you never knew were actually defining self-sufficient country life, while Nixon was in the White House and disco was taking over the cities. 1. Cathead biscuits. Cathead biscuits, so big they earned their name by rivaling the size of an actual cat's head. These weren't dainty sides. They were the very backbone of a real Appalachian breakfast in the early 70s. Mountain women worked flour, lard, buttermilk, and a whisper of baking powder together, careful not to overmix. That was a sin. Handfuls were shaped by feel and dropped onto a cast iron skillet swimming in bacon drippings. Baked fast and hot in old wood-fired ovens, what emerged were golden-bottomed towers with billowy insides that soaked up gravy like sponges. In Kentucky coal towns, miners' wives rose before the sun to bake these beasts, slipping extras into lunch pails headed underground. These were not cafe-style biscuits. They were dense with purpose, built to battle empty stomachs after intense labor. While today's southern brunch spots dress them up and price them high, back then cathead biscuits were Thursday's breakfast. Routine, resourceful, and unforgettable. 2. Red-eye gravy ham biscuits. Red-eye gravy wasn't pretty, but it sure didn't need to be. Named for its sleepless, red-eyed gleam, a swirl of ham fat and black coffee, this dish sprang from Depression-era know-how and kept strong through the 1970s. Thick-cut country ham hit a blazing hot skillet first, leaving behind a treasure of crusty bits. Then came a pour of left-behind coffee, sharp, dark, yesterday's brew, to lift every smoky scrap from the pan. The result? A thin, richly flavored gravy with eye-opening salt and bite. Weak coffee was a sin, only the bold held up. Ladled over split cathead biscuits or stone-ground grits with extra ham on the side, it made for a breakfast that could fuel hours underground or in the fields. Strange to untrained palates, sure. But for those raised where the mountains met the mines, the bittersweet punch of ham and coffee was iconic, comforting, even addictive. All it took was one taste, and that unfamiliar bowl became pure routine. 3. Hoe cakes. Hoe cakes weren't just food, they were a legacy. Originally seared on the flat of a hoe over an open flame, by the 70s most folks had shifted to skillets, but the name stuck. These were pancake-thin creations made of cornmeal, salt, water, or buttermilk, and occasionally an egg. No fluff, no nonsense. Just a sizzling hot pan, bacon grease, and a thick batter poured with precision. As the hoe cake kissed the heat, its edges turned into crispy lace, its center soft enough to tear. In Tennessee, daybreak saw farmhands scarfing them down while still on their feet, butter melting fast, sorghum syrup dripped over top. When wallets were light and the pantry nearly bare, all you ever really needed was cornmeal. No bells, no whistles, just the flavor of survival passed from hand to hand. Today, we might call them minimalist or rustic, but back then, a hot hoe cake meant comfort, tradition, and just enough energy to greet the sunrise with strength. 4. Chocolate gravy and biscuits. Chocolate gravy over biscuits. Sounds like dessert, but in Appalachian homes, this was serious breakfast business and pure Saturday morning magic. Made in old cast-iron skillets, it started with modest roots. Unsweetened cocoa, sugar, flour, and milk, stirred into a thick, glossy gravy. Hot from the stove, it pooled over split biscuits, seeping into every layer. Sweet but never sickening, it felt more like a pourable pudding than a sugary treat. Most used the familiar Hershey's cocoa, not gourmet, but good enough to make the kids cheer. Moms claimed it counted as a meal, thanks to the biscuit beneath. In quiet stretches of rural Arkansas, this was the highlight of the week, when cocoa and sugar were finally on hand. Biscuit tops stayed crisp, but their bottoms turned pudding soft. For modern foodies, it's a quirky comfort dish. For mountain families, it was how you gave children joy when the frost hit hard and spring still felt far away. 5. Fried cornmeal mush. Turn last night's cornmeal mush into morning gold. That's what Appalachian kitchens did best. Cook it thick with water and salt. Pour into a pan, and by daybreak it's firm and sliceable like a loaf. Cut thick, drop into a skillet full of bacon grease, and the transformation begins. The outside crisps to a golden crust, crackling at the touch, while the inside stays creamy and warm. In West Virginia's coal hollers, miners' wives crowned these slices with fried eggs, hot yolks spilling over like gravy. Some added sorghum molasses or apple butter. Others leaned into the savory side with just salt and pepper. No waste, no extras, just last night's famine turned into today's feast. This dish was a masterclass in making do. 3 humble ingredients, 1 hot skillet, and suddenly you had a breakfast richer than its recipe should allow. Texture was everything, the crisp shell yielding to soft mush, a quiet luxury in kitchens that had already given all they could. 6. Tomato gravy on biscuits. When tomatoes exploded out of mountain gardens in late summer, cooks found a way to carry that sun-kissed flavor into autumn mornings. Tomato gravy. It started with bacon drippings, then flour cooked into a roux, followed by pint jars of canned garden tomatoes poured in, juice and all. Stirred until thick, sometimes with a spoonful of sugar to tame the tang, it became a gravy unlike any other. Pinkish red, speckled with chunks, both savory and sweet. In North Carolina's tobacco towns, meatless mornings weren't rare, and this dish filled the plate with bold flavor on a thin budget. Served over fluffy biscuits, the sauce soaked each layer until the whole thing felt hearty and warm. While modern bistros call it heritage cuisine, families back then simply called it breakfast when money was thin and the pantry was rooted in last summer's sun. Tomato gravy wasn't about cost, it was about coaxing abundance from what the garden once gave. 7. Corn pone with butter drippings. Meet the heftier cousin of the hoe cake, corn pone. Where one was light and lacy, the other was dense, deliberate, and shaped by hand into thick patties you could hold and feel the weight of. Just cornmeal, salt, and water or buttermilk stirred into something more dough than batter. Wet hands kept it from sticking as each was pressed and fried in bacon grease or butter until the crust browned almost to black. Inside, moist, grainy, and bursting with that raw, honest corn flavor. Then came the butter drippings, not just melted butter, but those browned, nutty bits left behind in the pan, maybe touched with honey or sorghum. In the Kentucky hollers, where wheat flour was too pricey, these were the fallback. Hot off the skillet, they were split in half, letting the dripping seep deep. Gritty but with satisfying chew, corn pone proved that even the simplest foods, poor man's bread, could taste rich with the right traditions. 8. Hot water cornbread. Hot water cornbread was the meal you made when the cupboards echoed. No eggs, no milk, no flour, just cornmeal, boiling water, and salt. The boiling water partially cooked the cornmeal before it ever hit the skillet, giving this emergency bread its distinct texture. With thick paste in hand, cooks formed patties and dropped them into blazing hot grease, flattening them out just enough to crisp. If the fat wasn't hot enough, the cakes turned greasy and limp. But if it sizzled right, a shattering crust formed instantly, golden, blistered, and addicting. Biting in revealed a creamy interior that whispered with earthy corn flavor. In Appalachian coal country, these arrived when the economy dipped and the paychecks didn't. With no fridge, no factory goods, and only dry staples to trust, hot water cornbread became a lifeline. Today it's tagged as rustic and authentic by food writers. But back then, it was what you cooked when you had nothing, and somehow made it taste like something. 9. Fried bologna and egg sandwich. In the countryside of the early 70s, bologna didn't come from a plastic package. It came sliced thick from the butcher, ready for the skillet. And when fried, it changed completely. Scored at the edges to keep from curling, the slices puffed and browned, rich with rendered fat. Then came the eggs, cracked straight into that same hot pan, bathing in bologna grease, edges turning lacy and crisp. Piled onto white bread, sliced, soft, and often gently squished flat, the sandwich became a glorious mess of crispy meat, runny yolk, and oil-soaked bread. In Tennessee and Kentucky, this wasn't luxury. It was a reward Saturday morning post-farm workfare made with just a few coins worth of meat. That flavor, smoky, salty, and unmistakably rich, needed no garnish. Just hot coffee and the hum of a home waking up. Today's artisan breakfast sandwiches might flash truffle oil and microgreens, but they can't hold a candle to the greasy satisfaction of this blue-collar classic. 10. Johnny Cakes. Johnny Cakes may have come south with New England settlers, but by the 1970s, they were mountain breakfast royalty. Not to be confused with hot cakes, these relied on a thicker batter made from coarse, stone-ground cornmeal, water or milk, a spoonful of flour, and sometimes a hint of molasses. Spoon them onto the griddle about 3 inches wide and almost an inch thick, and they sizzled into crispy-edged, tender-centered cakes with a texture that sat somewhere between cornbread and pancake. The real star was the cornmeal itself, rustic, gritty, and rich with earthy sweetness. In the mountains of Virginia, these hit plates with butter and honey or sat alongside ham and eggs as fuel for field work. They were light enough to keep you nimble, yet hearty enough to hold you till noon. Unlike biscuits that could weigh you down, Johnny Cakes walked the line, welcoming tradition with just enough lift for a hard morning ahead. 11. Cornbread and milk. Cornbread and milk wasn't a recipe, it was a solution. A meal in a glass or bowl that needed no cooking at all. Last night's cornbread crumbled between calloused hands, cold milk poured over until the yellow crumbs floated like rustic cereal. Buttermilk if you had it, sweet milk if you didn't. Some added sugar or honey, others kept it plain, letting time soften the mix into a porridge-like mush. In coal towns across eastern Kentucky, kids slurped this down before school while dads headed out with biscuit sandwiches in tin lunch pails. The young ones got the cheaper meal but seldom complained. There was something oddly comforting in the way crunchy gave way to soggy, cool turned warm. For those raised in lean households, this wasn't just filler, it was familiar. Like a taste of simpler, tougher days that still lingered long after prosperity showed up. No frills. Just a full belly made with care, and whatever was left. 12. Fried grit cakes. Yesterday's grits became today's masterpiece in Appalachian kitchens. Once hot and pliable, they were poured into a loaf pan and chilled overnight until they set like a firm pudding. By morning, the grits sliced clean and neat, ready for the pan. Drop those slabs into sputtering bacon grease and something magical happened. Their surfaces turned golden and crisp, while the centers stayed soft and lush. In the lowcountry of South Carolina, families topped them with fried eggs or slices of salty country ham, yolk cascading down like gravy. Others drizzled them with syrup for a sweet salty twist. Regardless of how they were eaten, fried grit cakes were testimonies to thrift. The second life of a side dish turned breakfast centerpiece. Nothing wasted, everything transformed. Texture was king, that perfect balance between crackle and melt. When the pan was hot and the slices just right, yesterday's humble spoonful became something worth waking up early for. 13. Ash cakes. Ash cakes weren't relics, they were living fossils in Appalachian homes, still being made in the 1970s by mountain elders keeping memories alive. Mix cornmeal, salt, and water into a sturdy dough. Shape it into flat discs, about a half-inch thick. Then the magic. Wrap each one in large cabbage leaves or dried corn husks. Bury it right in the fireplace ashes and wait. The leaves protected the dough while it slow-cooked from the gentle, radiant heat. After 20 minutes or so, the bundles emerged steaming, smoky, and unforgettable. Inside, they were denser than cornbread, slightly chewy, and infused with a taste no oven could recreate. In Kentucky's deepest hollers, where stoves hadn't yet replaced hearths, this was Grandma's job, a method older than America itself. Ash cakes weren't trendy or reimagined. They were survivors wrapped in leaves, unchanged by time, connecting moon landings to musket days with one hot bite from the embers. 14. Fried apples with biscuits. When fall swept through the mountains and apple trees bent with fruit, fried apples landed on breakfast tables like a golden tradition. Thick-cut slices, peel left on for rustic charm, were tossed into hot butter or bacon grease where they browned and softened, caramelizing in the skillet. A sprinkle of sugar, brown or white, and a dusting of cinnamon worked their magic. Some added a splash of water to coax sweetness into syrup. Ladled over warm biscuits, the apple juices soaked deep, creating tender bites of flaky bread with sticky sweet filling. In North Carolina, after long days in the orchard, this was Sunday's reward, not quite dessert, not just breakfast, but perfect for both. Raisins made cameo appearances in some homes, though most kept it simple, just apples, spice, and warmth. It was a seasonal comfort that didn't need money to feel rich, just a tree in the yard, a pan on the stove, and the promise of cooler air outside. 15. Grits with red-eye gravy. A bowl of grits hit differently when crowned with red-eye gravy, a combination few outsiders understood, but Appalachians knew as standard fare. It started with proper grits, stone ground, simmered low and slow until they were creamy and thick enough to hold a spoon upright. Then came the red-eye, that slippery, reddish-brown mixture of coffee and ham fat poured on top without apology. The oily surface made a marbled swirl over the white corn porridge, offering smoky, salty, bitter notes in every bite. It didn't matter that northern taste buds found it awkward or extreme. In Tennessee or eastern Kentucky, this mix of flavors revived exhausted farmhands and fueled steel and timber crews. The caffeine gave a jolt, the grits filled the belly, and tradition finished the job. You didn't really grow to like it, you were born into it, and eventually couldn't do without it, one steaming spoonful at a time. 16. Liver mush with eggs and grits. Liver mush was Carolina gold, or something closer to mystery meat depending on who you asked. Made from pork liver, head meat, cornmeal, and sharp seasonings, it was cooked down, molded into loaves, and sold by the slice from every country store in the Piedmont. Fried in bacon grease until a crispy crust formed around a soft, savory middle, its taste was bold. Livery, earthy, unapologetically rich, not for the faint of heart. But for those who loved it, liver mush held a flavor that nothing else came close to. Paired with fried eggs and creamy grits, it became a protein-packed breakfast that stuck with you long after sunrise. If undercooked, it turned mushy, and that was unforgivable. Fry it hot and fast, though, and you had something fierce. Mill towns across western Carolina tucked slabs into lunchboxes beside biscuits, badges of local culture held together by pork, corn, and pride. Nowadays, it's heritage meat. Back then, it was just breakfast you could afford and maybe even crave. 17. Fried salt pork with eggs. Salt pork was bacon's primitive cousin, cheaper, saltier, and found hanging in homes long before fridges reached those mountain ridges. Essentially slabs of pork belly preserved in salt without smoke, it needed slicing thin, soaking quick, and frying hard. Done right, it crisped up with almost crystalline edges, rendering fat into the skillet and releasing pure, old-school pork flavor. The eggs went in next, dropped into the sizzling fat, turning brown and lacy around the edges as they soaked up flavor. This breakfast landed on biscuit or cornbread, the grease standing in for gravy. In eastern Kentucky coal towns, it showed up on plates when the budget didn't allow for bacon or anything else. The salt could punch hard, sometimes too hard, but that was the point. Flavor without cost. Stored wrapped in cloth down in the root cellar, salt pork didn't spoil easily. It was frugality on a plate, not for nostalgia, but necessity. A salty relic of survival still sizzling decades into the future. 18. Fried hominy with bacon and eggs. Hominy looked otherworldly, big, soft white kernels puffed up from light-treated corn, but in mountain homes, it was breakfast gold. Canned hominy was drained, then tossed into hot bacon grease where it sizzled until speckled with gold. Crispy on the outside, tender in the middle, and filled with that slightly alkaline kick that set it apart from regular corn. Served with sizzling bacon and over-easy eggs, it turned a humble plate into something rustic but rich. In the Ozarks and parts of southern Appalachia, this became weekend fare, the kind of meal that broke up biscuit fatigue. Some stirred in onions and peppers, others let the bacon do the talking. Either way, the hominy soaked up flavor with ease, holding its shape while gaining chew. Where canned goods met old traditions, this dish stood tall, proof that even industrial ingredients could be pulled into the rhythms of mountain kitchens, transforming store-bought into something deeply personal, passed down, and proudly adapted. 19. Spoon bread. Spoon bread wasn't your weekday scramble. This was Sunday best, light as clouds and saved for special mornings like Christmas or preacher visits. A souffle by another name, it started with cornmeal, milk, butter, and eggs, but not just mixed. The whites were whisked to stiff peaks, then folded gently into the creamy batter for lift and loft. Baked in a hot cast-iron skillet, it rose like a dream, then browned into a delicate golden dome. Too soft to slice, you had to spoon each portion onto the plate, watching steam curl upward with each bite. In Virginia's mountain towns, it shared space with country ham and red-eye gravy, butter melting fast over top, or sweet syrup drizzled like dessert. While biscuits got all the press, this was cornbread's elegant cousin, still humble in ingredients but refined in execution. A dish that whispered skill and southern grace, handed down not just through instructions, but through rhythm, care, and remembered timing. 20. Salbellian fried eggs. Slow belly was poverty food from the inside out, thick slabs of salt-cured pork belly, cheaper than salt pork and heavier with fat. Cut into strips, it needed patience, low frying to render properly, releasing a pool of hot grease and shrinking until just the crispiest bits remained. The meat crackled, the fat turned to glass. Eggs followed, sliding right into the sizzling pan and picking up every corner of flavor while frying crisp around the edges. With cornbread or biscuits to mop up what remained, this meal was pure grit, heavy, greasy, and built to fuel backbreaking labor. In Appalachia's poorest corners during tough stretches of the 70s, salbelli wasn't optional, it was available and lasting. Modern food frowns on it for fat and salt, but this wasn't about indulgence. It was about a full stomach when nothing else filled the shelves. Eating it didn't symbolize thrift, it was thrift, survival by the skillet, with lessons cooked right into the crunch. 21. Venison sausage patties. In the mountain south, venison sausage wasn't store-bought or novelty. It was proof a man could still feed his family from forest to skillet. After a successful hunt, deer meat was ground with pork fat, venison too lean alone, and mixed with sage, pepper, and salt. Formed into thick patties, the sausages hit cast-iron skillets and sizzled into perfect crusts with juicy, game-rich centers. The taste was wild and unmistakable, earthy, slightly tangy, a flavor straight from oak groves and valley shadows. In West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, this breakfast showed up every fall as deer season wrapped. It wasn't just food, it was a social tradition. Neighbors gathered to grind meat, debate spice ratios, sip coffee, and get it just right. Eaten alongside eggs and biscuits with thick gravy pooling underneath, venison sausage filled homes with pride, flavor, and the reminder that survival was still in their hands. No supermarket could offer what this breakfast gave: heritage, sustenance, and the flavor of freedom hard-won. 22. Sawmill gravy. Sawmill gravy earned its name the hard way, born in lumber camps that needed to feed dozens of men with little more than drippings and flour. By the 70s, every Appalachian kitchen had a version. It started with sausage grease or bacon fat, just enough to coat cast iron. In it went flour browned carefully, then milk poured in steady, whisked until smooth, flecked with black pepper like it meant business. Some stirred in sausage chunks. Others relied on pure fat and seasoning. Poured slow and thick over hot biscuits, soaking into every crack and hollow, turning plain bread into rich, peppery layers of savory gold. In logging towns across Tennessee, it showed up daily, fueling men who risked life and limb with chainsaws and grit. Every cook had their preference. Some liked it spicy, others mellow. But all shared one truth: sawmill gravy wasn't just a meal, it was respect made edible. A creamy, steaming tradition that turned thrifty scraps into something extraordinary. 23. Hominy. Hominy looked like it came from another planet, puffed up white pearls with ghostly sheen, but mountain cooks knew better. This was ancient food with Cherokee origins, brought into Appalachian kitchens in the 1800s. Making it from scratch wasn't easy. Dry corn soaked for days in lime water, often made from hardwood ashes, until the tough hulls fell away and each kernel nearly doubled in size. Stirred in big pots, rinsed in fresh spring water again and again, the hominy emerged soft, pale, and ready to nourish. It could be stewed into breakfast porridge, crisped in pork fat, or dried for winter storage. The canned version lining grocery shelves today, just a weak echo. Mountain hominy had texture, it had a body, and it carried with it generations of tradition, careful hands, smoky fires, and lessons learned alongside Cherokee neighbors. In these homes, food wasn't just eaten. It was cultivated, transformed, passed down, and preserved like stories told around the fire. 24. Apple stack cake. Apple stack cake was more than dessert. It was architecture, heritage, and community all layered into one ambitious centerpiece. No wedding was complete without one. Sugar being scarce, each guest brought a thin spiced cake layer while the bride's family prepared the real star. Thick, sticky filling made from dried apples slow-cooked with molasses, spices, and sometimes a splash of moonshine. The layers stacked, 6, 8, sometimes 12 high, each one spread with a generous smear of apple between. Covered and left to rest for days, the cake softened, the filling soaking into every tear until it sliced like a rich, spiced memory. It tasted like fall, deep, earthy, sweet, and comforting. But it also stood as proof that Appalachians knew how to turn scarcity into ceremony. Everyone contributed, everyone shared. The result, a towering, humble masterpiece. You didn't rush an apple stack cake, it asked for patience, for gathering, and for togetherness. The flavor, worth every weight. 25. Squirrels and dumplings. When winter lingers and pantry shelves go bare, the hills still offer squirrels, and with it, a hearty pot of comfort called squirrel and dumplings. Catching squirrels was a rite of passage for mountain boys. Cooking was a test of skill for their mothers and wives. The meat was browned in bacon grease, then simmered with wild onions and herbs until it all fell off the bone. Meanwhile, dumplings, just flour, salt, and a splash of milk or water, were flattened and cut into thick strips. Dropped into the bubbling broth, they puffed as they cooked, soaking up meaty richness. What emerged was a meal thick with texture and flavor, stretching small game into bowls enough for all. In sparse cabins, it tasted like plenty. In wood-heated kitchens, it smelled like survival. More than a meal, it was a tradition. Hunting, preparing, sharing. The woods gave, the family gathered, and from 2 or 3 squirrels came flavor enough to feed a family, sometimes twice. 26. Turtle soup with cornbread. Turtle soup wasn't desperation food, it was celebration. In mountain ponds and slow rivers, snapping turtles waded beneath the murk, tough as they came and hard to catch. But if you caught one, you caught a feast. After cleaning and carving through the thick shell, the tender meat inside was simmered low with wild onions, root veggies, and herbs until the broth turned rich and meaty. Some added chopped boiled eggs, others a dash of vinegar for a bright bite. What landed on the table was unlike anything else, dark, complex, and unforgettable. Served with a slab of hot cornbread to soak up the soup, it felt almost lavish. And in those hills it was. Reserved for honored guests or big family moments, turtle soup proved that rural tables could rival elite city menus when nature, courage, and tradition came together. Behind every bite stood patience, risk, and honor, and a flavor unmatched by anything found in a box. 27. Fried catfish and hush puppies. Down in glimmering creeks and cool mountain streams, whiskered catfish lurked in shadowy holes, and hauling one out meant it was time for a fish fry. These weren't scenic fly fishing excursions. They were sleeves rolled, hands deep in the water kind of catches. Once cleaned and skinned, the fillet soaked briefly in buttermilk, then dredged in spiced cornmeal that crackled when it hit hot lard. The result? Crisp outer crust, moist white inside, and no muddy aftertaste, just clean, honest fish. And always beside it, hush puppies. Onion-laced cornmeal batter dropped lovingly into the same fat. They are fried to golden perfection, crunchy outside, tender within. Legend says their name came from cooks tossing them to barking dogs with a sharp hush puppies. Whether that's true or not, the pairing was inseparable. These fish fries became community events, stories passed, songs sung, kids playing while grown-ups fried. Nothing fancy. Just fresh water, friend-gathered fish, and food that tasted like celebration under open skies. 28. Leather breeches. Leather breeches weren't pants. They were beans strung up, dried hard and rattling like old button strings in the rafters. When summer gardens overflowed with green beans, families bundled the extras into long needle-threaded garlands. They hung from porches, attic beams, even kitchen ceilings where air flowed freely. Weeks passed, and the beans shriveled down to brown, crinkled strips nearly unrecognizable. But come winter, they were gold. Rehydrated in broth with fatback or bacon and simmered long and slow, the beans came back to life with more flavor than they ever had, fresh, slightly smoky, deeply earthy. The name came from the look and the texture, wrinkled, leathery, a little chewy. Drying them meant keeping vegetables when jars and canning lids were scarce or too expensive. Leather breeches weren't fancy, but they were smart. The result was warm, hearty, and rich with that ever-present Appalachian creativity. Proof you didn't need much to feed a family year-round. Just sun, string, and time. 29. Southern beans and cornbread. Beans and cornbread weren't side dishes. They were the foundation, the heart of Appalachian survival. Simple dried beans, usually pintos or white navy beans, soaked then simmered all day with nothing more than a piece of salt pork or a ham hock. As they cooked, they turned creamy, rustic, and full of depth. Cornbread came alongside, baked crisp in cast iron, ready to dip, crumble, and sop. Together, they created a complete protein, more nutritious than meat alone and far cheaper. These weren't poor meals out of pity. They were balanced, filling, and full of soul. The gardens gave the beans, stone mills gave cornmeal, and old know-how did the rest. This meal didn't need improvement, modernization, or garnish. It fed generations through harsh winters, mine strikes, and hard harvests. On those quiet mornings or stretched-out suppers, beans and cornbread didn't just fill plates. They carried tradition forward, one ladle and crumb at a time, unchanged and undefeatable. These weren't just breakfast plates. They were memories, methods, and moments passed down over open flames, in cast iron, and with hands that knew how to make something from nothing. If any of these dishes stirred something in you, a memory, a flavor, or just some good old curiosity, we'd love to hear about it. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed riding through the past, and drop a comment below with what breakfast from your heritage tells a similar story. Until next time, keep the fire warm and the skillet hot.